This is the Ekoslide installation video. So the purpose of this video is to explain to you how to choose where to put the Ekoslides and then the basics of bolting them onto the switch. So the first step before you do anything is to determine how many Ekoslides you need, where they're going to go, and then to lay out the installation, all before you start bolting them on. Bolting them on is the easy part. First you need the configuration. So remember, every switch is different, and by that I mean the bolt patterns of many switches throughout the years have changed at anyone's railroad. You may have a mix of different standards, and you may just have some points that have been replaced over time. So therefore it's important to see how the bolt pattern is lining up over the ties. Now, to get us started, I want to use the Ekoslide instruction manual to point out a few important points. Number one, on page 3, you'll see the list of recommended tools. And it's handy to review this before you go to do any sort of installation with Ekoslide. They're not all required. Ekoslide can very much be done with a couple wrenches, but it would be ideal to have this complete list with you if possible. Page 4 here, and the pages 4 to 6 are the pages that are going to determine your configuration. So by that I mean, if you've got a short switch, let's say you've got a number 8 or a number 10 or a number 11, then you're going to need 4 Ekoslides, or 2 per side. If you've got a number 15, you're going to need 6 Ekoslides, or 3 per side. And if you've got number 20 or even number 24, then it's 8 Ekoslides, or 4 per side. So just know the length of your turnout determines how many Ekoslides you need. Now the basic idea is you want to lift up your entire switch point. So if you need to lift up your entire switch point, that means you don't just need the proper numbers, but you need to space the Ekoslides evenly throughout so they're actually lifting up the entire switch point. One important rule, which you see at the bottom of page 4, is the 4 and 4 rule, which means you want to make sure your first set of rollers are on the 4th tie or closer to the front. So ties 1, 2, 3, or 4, preferably 1 to 3, but at least not further back than tie 4, or else you'll have too much drag in the front. As you know, in most switch points, there's more weight towards the front, so it's most important the front is lifted up. After you get that first pair on one of the first 4 ties, you then have a lot of flexibility. You just want to space it out wherever you can on the way down. Moving on to page 5 and 6 together, I'll say both, you're going to see that the Ekoslides that you use are determined by the bolt spacing. So in ARIMA standard turnouts, your most common bolt spacings are 5-inch bolt spacing, 10-inch bolt spacing, and 15-inch bolt spacing. So for that reason, you've got 3 primary Ekoslides. You've got a CX, a CZ10, and a CZ15. So CX is for 5-inch bolt spacing, CZ10 is for 10-inch bolt spacing, and CZ15 is for 15-inch bolt spacing. There's one important exception on the 5-inch bolt spacing. There's CX, but for railroads that use the common standard, so BNSF, UP, and KCS, and any other railroads that may share their standards, will use both the CX and the CZ5. The difference is both are for 5-inch bolt spacing, but the CZ5 is lower because with common standard turnouts at the front of the switch, the ABR drillings are lower, so therefore you need a shorter Ekoslide. And this shows you again not just the standard bolt spacings, but you can see with the CZ10 and the CZ15 you actually have a lot of flexibility with these elongated holes and where you place Ekoslide. Continuing on the bottom of page 5, I'd just like to point out the sleeves. So these sleeves here are to handle different bolt diameters. So 2 little sleeves are included with each roller. If you have 1-inch diameter bolts, you do not need the sleeves. But if you have 3/4-inch diameter bolts or 5/8-inch diameter bolts, then you should insert these sleeves in the Ekoslide bolt hole so that you don't have so much play in there when you tighten down. When you're going to a turnout to retrofit with Ekoslide, what you're looking for is how the bolts are lining up over the ties. So similar to when I first started explaining on page 4 of the instruction manual that you need to get the proper number of Ekoslides for that switch, I then go on to say you want to get the first set and one of the first 4 ties. Well, by that I mean you need to see where the bolts are lining up over the ties so that you can get the roller to firmly roll on the tie plate. So looking at this first one here, but you can see that this first location could be an option for installing Ekoslide for the simple reason that you can put a roller right here and then it has room to slide. And you've got to have 2 bolts somewhat lined up over that tie. Moving on here, tie 2 is not an option because you only have 1 bolt here, so there's no way you could secure an Ekoslide. Same thing on tie 3. But now I come to tie 4, and tie 4, you see there's a plate right between the bolts, and if you measure, we're right at 15 inches. So this is an excellent example of where you can use a CZ15, which is the longest one, that covers that 15-inch center-to-center bolt spacing. This is an excellent example. Moving on here to the 5th tie though, this fifth tie is not an option, there's no bolts. Neither is the 6th. The 7th tie could theoretically be used, but you've got rivets here. So in this case, to use it, you'd have to cut the rivets and put bolts in instead. And then the last one we'll talk about is tie 8. And again, where these stops are always a great option because stops are almost always 5-inch bolt spacing and they're lined up over a tie plate the vast majority of the time. So it's very common for your last location to be where the stops are located. To summarize what we just identified is there's 3 possible locations for Ekoslide on the switch. We've got the first tie, 2, 3, 4, the 4th tie, 5, 6, 7, 8, and the 8th tie. So we've got 3 possible locations, and 2 of them have 5-inch spacing, which is going to be a CX in this case. The other location is tie 4, where we're going to use a CZ15, which is the long one. Now, going back to the discussion about CZ5 versus CX, as these have your standard ARIMA bolt height of 2 7/8, we're only going to need CX. You use CZ5 in the cases where you have 2 3/8 ABR drillings. These are 2 7/8, which tells you you have your normal standard height. You don't need to worry about the short CZ5 type. CZ5 is only for 2 3/8 inches. As you install the CX or the CZ5, notice that you need to shift it back and forth to get the washers and then the nuts on. This is completely normal, so just know as you tighten down, particularly with 1-inch diameter bolts such as these, there's not a lot of wiggle room. So just do a few turns and shift the Ekoslide back and forth to tighten it down if you have a tight fit.